Well, I have 3 class periods that have Hispanic students in them, and then with students that I don't have, a lot of times I'm keeping tabs on them, and even in the community, I'll keep tabs on my former students.
Okay. What just in a normal day for Thomas, what do you do when you come in here? What do you do in your classes, just day to day when you get here?
Okay. With my ELL, which is English Language Learners, they change the acronym every year. That way we sound smarter. But basically what I do is I help them try to survive academically is part of the job description. The other part is just teach them English. So half of my day will be kind of grammar / just conversational things. Sometimes it's quirky, like we'll cover songs, that way they can kind of understand slang. And the other part is, they'll be taking chemistry, but they can't even introduce themselves. And so we try to learn study skills, things like that, to help them survive.
Right. Are most of the ELL students, especially your Hispanic students, are they pretty receptive to your help and everything? Are they?
Yeah, and that's why this is my first year teaching American students, and I can honestly say it's also the first year I've had students not do their homework. It's just one of those things. Where the English language learners are very grateful for their help.
Where are most of the Spanish speakers from? Do you know what country?
Majority are from Mexico, and of those, probably half of mine are from Chiapas, so the southern part of Mexico. So.
What brings them here, especially more than anybody else?
I'm really not sure. I've always assumed it's more economically disadvantaged than other states, just because when I was in high school, they had the little miniature revolution with the Zapatista rebels, and so that region's, I know about it just from news, but for the most part, anybody from Mexico that I have, they came here for economic improvement, I guess you would say.
Talk about just some of the problems that the Hispanic students here that are in the high school face day to day with just whether it's the language or what.
Okay. I would say it comes academic and social will be the 2 facets that they run into most of the time. Well, academically, they're trying to learn a language, but they only get 1 period a day to teach them that language. And so for the rest of the day, they're in Mississippi Studies, they're in chemistry, and so they have a lot of stress. I have a huge dropout rate with my Hispanic students, just because when you come in from another school, if you don't have your transcripts and things like that, the school automatically put you in 9th grade because of state testing. And state testing, I don't know if you've faced that, but it's huge. And if you don't pass it, well, you don't get to graduate. And if you don't pass it, the school looks bad. And so what the school will do is to protect themselves too, is to put them in 9th grade. Well, I'll have a 17-year-old come in and be put in 9th grade. Chances of him finishing. So academically, you have a timer that's constantly going in the background saying, I'm going to drop out if I don't get out of this fast. And so it's a big part of my job is keeping them in, trying to maintain even family relationships, just trying to help them survive it. And I have had a few, but not as many as I'd like.
So if an 11th grade student comes here, doesn't have his transcripts, can he take the test, and if he can prove that he's 11th grade level, he can go to 11th grade, or it's just if you don't have your transcripts, automatic 9th grade?
Yeah, it's pretty, you're predestined to go to 9th grade if you show up without those transcripts.
And that's with anybody?
With anybody, yeah. It's not just Hispanic students.
Yeah,
it's because I have currently I have several students in my first period class from different countries, and they're all freshmen. And even though some of them were like, well, I was a junior in my home country, well, it's just one of those things. If they would have had the proper paperwork, more than likely they would have been put in the appropriate grade. But even then, it makes everybody nervous, just because to take the English 2 exam, which is a sophomore year test, and you get put in as a junior, you probably want to fail it first go around.
Talk about the social aspect. You said the social was another thing.
The social one aspect of it that I didn't know much about is there's actually cliques within the clique system, because you'll see some of the Hispanics who were born here. Okay, I'll just keep going. Okay, some of the Hispanics that were born here actually are kind of seen as an upper class citizen to those who just arrived, and so you'll see competition with that. Even within I have some students from Honduras or Venezuela. Well, those are even kind of ostracized by the other, and so it's a very, it's not as simple as it seems from the outside looking in, you know. So they have their own personal dynamics, but then also just with high school students in general, high school's not a nice place to exist because you know people are making fun of each other and stuff like that. So you run into a lot of, I guess, complications. Because if you are learning English as a second language, and then somebody's making fun of you, well, the only way you know how to retort is usually with foul language, which is the things you learn first in a foreign language, and so they'll get written up. Whereas if the kid was talking about their mom or making fun of them being different, you know, they don't get in trouble as much. But when that person turns around and uses expletives, well, they get written up and end up in ISS. So a few of them make it. Like, for example, there's some students here that are economically well-to-do that are also Hispanic. They, of course, they've assimilated just fine, you know. I'm sure, unfortunately, it's part of human nature. If somebody drives up in a Mercedes, well, you're going to be like, well, they must be cool, you know, especially on a high school level for sure. Whereas my less economically well-off kids or whatnot, I would say they pretty much, their friendships are formed within their own group. They rarely breach out of that. Girls more so than guys are able to establish friendships outside of their own, I guess, ethnic group, I guess, if you would call it that.
You spoke earlier in the very beginning, part of the interview, that you also help outside the classroom with I don't know if you said with the community or the family. Can you speak on that just to...
Yeah, like, well, you know, I mentioned that my dropout rates are abysmal right now. Basically, I try to meet parents. We have parent nights here, but where I live in Oxford is actually North Oxford, and there's a small pocket of a Hispanic community nearby, and they'll come over to our house, and basically I try to maintain that relationship. One, to try to help them if I can, especially if they've dropped out. They've already, I don't think they realize it, but they've really damaged their ability to move forward, and so I try to just see what we can do. In addition to that, one of the speakers we have with ELL, she calls it the cousin effect, where when one family comes in, if they find everything nice, which I haven't had many say they haven't liked Oxford. Well, what happens is they tell family members and say, we're living in Oxford, we have a nice job, it's a nice community, people are friendly to us. Well, then family members start to come in. And not to my knowledge, I've not had a single family not have an additional family member come in. And so I'll teach one kid in the community, I maintain that relationship, and then one day they just show up at my house saying, hey, this is my cousin, he's starting tomorrow. And so it helps them make an adjustment too, because they meet me before they even come in.
That's interesting. Another aspect that we've covered in the story is the Hispanic kids from high school here in Lafayette also going to college. If a lot of them, I don't know what the exact rules are, how hard it is to get into high school. If someone shows up here without their papers, with being legal, can they still get into high school as long as they can prove that they're this age? Or do you know the rules on that?
Yeah, that's when you start getting, you know, federal rules versus state rules, and I guess Arizona and Mississippi was trying to make a vote on it recently, but for the longest time, what the state required and what the federal required, by federal law, you couldn't ask. You know, basically, if somebody shows up and says, "I'm 17," you are required by law to allow them into school, and so as a result, when they come, you can't ask. I mean, some of them will tell you sometimes. Like I've had a student who was very candid about it. You know, he would joke about it. The difficulties they'll face going to college, you can't go to a community college, whereas in Oxford they had that. I guess it was a law passed where if you're a graduate of Oxford High School, Lafayette High School, you can go to the junior college for free, where they'll pay for your first 2 years. Well, that's not available for a Hispanic student who comes in and doesn't have, you know, social security number, things like that.
And
but yeah, the appropriate documentation, whatnot. But at Ole Miss, that same rule applies, where by law they don't have to have proof of birth certificate, things like that. And so but where it gets them is they have to pay out-of-state tuition, even if they were born here. Well, born here wouldn't work because they would end up being a citizen. But if they move here shortly after birth and have been here in Oxford, they still won't get residency status on their tuition rate. So.
Will they have to claim, say, Mexico as their home, or
Yeah,
just?
I'm not really sure. I think they put a local address, but it's just not, I guess, validated.
Validated or backed up, so
Mhm.
they end up having to pay out of state tuition.